Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of All Politics Are Local. I'm WSAV Now reporter John Dowding. Every week, we take the time to break down some of those big headlines coming out of Washington to see how it impacts us right here in the coastal empire and low country. We have a big episode, a lot to talk about today. So, leave no further ado. We're being joined by WSAV Washington correspondent Kelly Meyer. Hey, Kelly, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing okay, John. Thank you for having me. I know a lot has happened since we last talked. It's almost hard to believe.
Yeah, it's funny because last week, this time uh we were preparing for what we thought was going to be the headline of the week, which was the Georgia Senate races, which we'll talk
Right.
about later on in this episode. But obviously, life in the world had other plans. I'm first and foremost happy that you are safe and that you weren't on the Capitol that day. So that that's a positive little bit of news there. But we have to. I mean, it's still the headline this week for a lot of people. The fallout from the insurrection attempt at the Capitol. Kelly, I just want to start off right away with you were in D.C. when all of this was going on with when when the curfew started, when all these things started happening. Kelly, just break down for us, what were you seeing, what were you hearing, what was it like being in Washington at that, it's sad to say historic, but during this historic time.
Well, I was pretty much right here. We've been working from home because of the pandemic. And then we also heard that there may be some protests. There were protests the night before when I was at the office. So we were just, trying to be safe. Only people that had to be at the office go in, otherwise work from home. So I was here and, like many of you, watching the video pour in on television in real time. So watching that come in and seeing the footage and, having those cameras inside the congressional hallways, and you're able to see the mob walking by, these pro-Trump supporters walking through the halls. Obviously, that they breached security and breached the Capitol there was shocking, and it was really hard uh, to believe what I was seeing, and immediately thought of my colleagues, staff, members of Congress, aides, everybody inside that I knew, texting to see if they were okay. But like you said, I mean, thankfully I was at home, but many others up there. It could have been so much worse, and I know in the days following, just so much trauma that everybody that was there is dealing with.
And I mean, also too, unfortunately, 5 deaths occurred because of this insurrection attempt. Some law enforcement officers, some people who attended, and this all stemmed from this rally that the president had, with talking to his supporters, basically trying to get them to stop this electoral vote count, which really is not it's formal procedure, but it's just meant to be ceremonial, more than anything. So they can't really stop anything. The votes have been counted. The votes have been certified. The Joe Biden has won the presidency. Kamala Harris will be the vice president. So they tried to stop this electoral process from going on. And it's just something we never anticipated. We knew there were going to be protests. We know now that, obviously there was a major failure in communication and in procedures with Capitol Police and other law enforcement agencies. And also, too, we're now hearing that there's going to be the possibility for more protests next week during the inauguration. And so we're seeing one of the largest fallouts from this whole situation, from this whole insurrection. I'm going to just keep calling it what it is, a domestic terrorist attack, honestly, is now another attempt by House Democrats and other Democratic lawmakers to impeach President Trump. So Kelly, yesterday we saw that House Democrats introduced the articles for impeachment. They introduced, their reasoning and why they want to pursue another impeachment proceeding for the president, even though he has almost less than a week left in office. Kelly, what talk to us more about impeachment? What is the chances that this will go through, and what is this procedure looking like? Why are they trying to do this with less than 2 weeks left in this man's presidency?
I think for many lawmakers I've talked to, it's just setting the precedent that they won't stand for what happened. Many of them saying, if we do not impeach for a coup or insurrection on Capitol Hill, egged on by our current president, what will we impeach for? So they're trying to set the precedent here. And as you mentioned, this is all of the continuing fallout from what happened last week. Of course, the first step for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and now Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, they would like to see the president resign or be removed by the 25th Amendment. They are urging the vice president to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove the president, and then Vice President Mike Pence would serve in the remaining days. Uh, that will be a resolution that will be voted on this evening in the House. So if you're watching, keep an eye out for that. They aren't expecting the president or the vice president to invoke the 25th Amendment. So they are moving forward and expected to vote on impeachment, an article of impeachment on Wednesday. That would be historic in itself. To impeach a president twice in his term has not been done. And it looks as though that's what they are moving towards.
And so, what are you hearing from some of the different administration officials? I know you're covering the White House this week. This final week of the Trump administration, a tumultuous, an unpredictable administration that we've seen over the last 4 years. So, what are you hearing from different administration officials and other lawmakers about this new effort to try and impeach the president?
Well, I talked with the acting commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection yesterday because the president is planning to go to Alamo, Texas to visit the border and celebrate what he calls his accomplishments at the border there and building 450 miles of border wall. He will be there later this afternoon. So we were chatting about that. But when I asked if this trip was a distraction from what's happening in Washington, i.e., the impeachment process, or appropriate after the act of insurrection at the Capitol last week, he said that, this isn't, he doesn't believe in his personal opinion, this is a distraction. He believes that this is something they were planning to celebrate in his final week in office. We could play a little bit of his interview yesterday.
This is something that we've done along the way, and this is a significant milestone. And so I think there is a recognition, regardless of what transpired last week, those tragic events, whether that happened or not, we still would have been doing this. We've been planning this all along.
We're also expected to hear from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo this morning as well, to see maybe if he mentions anything of what's happening or criticizes the president. He's someone that has stood by him for all 4 years. So I doubt he may have any strong words against the president, but we'll see. And as we saw last night, acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf also resigned following stepping up some more increased security around Biden's inauguration.
And also to a lot of these cabinet secretaries, I mean, we've obviously, so also in addition to the people you just mentioned, we've had Elaine Chao, the Secretary of Transportation. She resigned. She was the first one too. Then we saw Betsy DeVos from she was the Secretary of Education. She resigned. And these secretaries of these cabinet officials would be those people to determine whether or not they would invoke the 25th Amendment. So I know there's some discussion saying that, some of these people resigning are kind of just doing it as a way to avoid having to come to that vote for the 25th Amendment if it is brought up. But so I'm sure we're going to see another more flurry of these officials leaving in the next few days. So, but I mean, and this is something that is going to continue. We heard there may be a potential for a House vote on this on Wednesday. I believe House Majority Leader Sawyer was saying that yesterday. Hoyer, right?
Yes, Steny Hoyer, and they are
using the first and last name. Yes, it's like a rhyming name. Yes, Steny Hoyer. We're talking about that on Wednesday, but we'll keep y'all updated. Just stick with News 3 as your local election headquarters, as we like to say, over the next few weeks, as we're seeing how these impeachment proceedings will continue, and it sounds like they're also going to continue into the Trump administration, the Biden administration, I should say. Still kind of early right now. It's been a long 2 weeks, but Kelly, I want to also switch gears and talk about something that we were preparing to talk about all last week, which was the Georgia Senate races. We had the Georgia Senate runoff races last week, two pivotal historic races here in Georgia, and they both flipped blue for the first time, and I don't even know how long. That Georgia has had two Democratic senators, also making history as one of the first African-American Democratic senators from the South, and Raphael Warnock, that is, and he will be the first African-American Democratic senator from the Peach State. Kelly, we've got to talk about, the impacts of this. What does this, mean for not just Democrats, but for the Biden administration and for now the new majority leader, Chuck Schumer.
Yeah, it changes everything up here. And like you mentioned, this would have been the headline throughout last week into this week if what happened didn't happen. And it even quelled, I mentioned in my stories last week, some of the celebrations for Warnock, who knew Wednesday, as of Wednesday morning when you woke up, that he won his race against incumbent Republican Kelly Loeffler. And then later in the day, when Ossoff's race was called against incumbent David Perdue. So they were finding out this news as they were seeing their future place of office being stormed by pro-Trump supporters. So in real time, seeing what they're walking into as the new senators of Georgia, what they are going to have to work to bridge the Trump supporters and the Biden supporters in the state. Not only that, they'll be ushering in the Democratic majority in the Senate. That means Kamala Harris will be the tiebreaker there in the Senate. Granted, that means that all Democrats vote together. So they really are changing the tune up here. And as you mentioned, it will also affect what policies Biden can push through and his cabinet nominees. That's the first thing really on his agenda is the cabinet nominees as well as COVID. And when I talked to Warnock last Thursday morning, he mentioned that the $2,000 stimulus check is a priority. But he also did touch on, of course, the impact that Wednesday had. And we could play a little bit of that.
To watch what happened yesterday, the ways in which these folks were handled is something to behold. That behind these debates is a more fundamental question about the character of the country.
Again, you just heard from one of our new senators here in Georgia, Reverend Raphael Warnock. It's funny because not his running mate, but basically his companion running in the other Senate race, John.
They very much ran like that, right? It was. It was a team.
Yeah, as a team, it almost as like a presidential ticket down here. But the person he was running with, John Ossoff, he also won his race against incumbent Senator David Perdue. And the funny thing was, I remember, well, first of all, I need to correct something you said before. You said when everybody woke up, they saw Reverend Raphael Warnock won. We were both up at 3 a.m. that night.
That's true.
Because we think they're going to call it, but I digress. But, it's funny because John Ossoff's race was called in the middle of Biden's address to the nation on Wednesday during the attacks on the Capitol. Completely overlooked. I remember getting texts from some of my friends, some in Georgia, some, back home in New Jersey for me, in Pennsylvania. And people were saying to me, they're like, is the Georgia races done? Are they done yet? Did they call a winner? It's like, yeah, they did. It's just there's an insurrection in the Capitol right now. So, and I think we lost the ability to really delve into and dig into why this is so important, why both of Georgia's new Democratic senators are so important to the Biden administration. Like you said, Kelly, brilliantly, it's his cabinet officials, it's his policies in his first 100 days. I will say, though, that it just adds a lot more pressure and here on the ballot in Georgia here in 2022, because Reverend Raphael Warnock's seat will be up again that year, and as well as a gubernatorial race here with Governor Kemp and whoever is going to challenge him on the Democratic side. So it's going to add a lot more pressure, a lot more things to look at. I know, Kelly, it never ends, it seems like.
I know. I was going to say, give Georgians a break. All the mail and all the calls and all the texts.
Yep, finally those all stopped. We are back to having normal commercials here, not a
give them a moment to breathe here.
Literally one moment. That's all we're gonna get. One moment to breathe before the election cycle starts up again for midterms. But so we're gonna just keep our eye out. Really the next 100 days is going to determine a lot as far as vaccine rollout, I should say, as a new round of stimulus, all of these different Democratic goals that they want to get together and push through in the Senate and the House are going to honestly probably take a back seat with the impeachment proceedings. But we'll just have to see. As always, thank you so much, Kelly, for joining us this morning to break down everything. We had like you said, a lot happened last week. So thanks for being here to talk about it with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And as always, you can see more of Kelly's stories on our website. Just go to wsav.com/Washington. You can catch up on previous episodes of All Politics Are Local as well. Just go to wsav.com/allpoliticsarelocal. I'm John Dowding. Thank you so much again for watching. We'll see you again next week on All Politics Are Local.